Max Martin is arguably the most influential person in international music over the last 30 years. Whilst you may not be familiar with his name, you almost certainly have sang his lyrics or hummed his melodies. And as of 2023, he is the third most successful songwriter in the history of American music, with 25 US number ones to his name, only bettered by legends such as Paul McCartney, who was 32, and John Lennon with 26. What a group of lazy underachievers. So just who exactly is Max Martin? Is Max Martin even his real name? How did a former lead singer from a metal band end up a pop genius? Why did he originally turn down the chance to work with Michael Jackson? Why did Kelly Clarkson not like working with him? And who exactly are his proteges such as Dr Luke and Shellback? So many questions, let's find out. So is Max Martin really the king of pop? Some might say that to claim that title, you need to be a vocalist and a performer. Others may be of the opinion that cultural impact should be factored into the equation. With 25 American number one songs, he has the same number of chart toppers stateside as Michael Jackson and Madonna combined. His influence working with almost all of the world's biggest pop stars and his longevity as a hitmaker are simply unparalleled. Obviously, the answer is very subjective, but in my humble opinion, he is the king of pop. Max Martin, real name Carl Martin Sandberg, was born in 1971 in Stenhammar, a suburb of Stockholm, the son of a policeman and a teacher. Surprisingly, he doesn't actually come from a family of musicians. In an interview for the BBC's We Write the Songs podcast, Max spoke about the music programs in Swedish schools where every student gets to try an instrument. And interestingly, Max chose the French horn. He soon joined a rock group in his early teens, starting as a drummer and eventually becoming the lead singer. By age 14, he was composing his own songs. The band started buying production equipment to make their own music, and other musicians started approaching Max, asking him to record their demos, allowing him to cut his teeth as a producer. According to John Seabrook's book, The Song Machine: How to Make a Hit, Martin dropped out of secondary school in the mid-80s to go full-time with his metal band, It's Alive. Their self-titled debut was released in 91 and, according to The Guardian, was ultimately given away free with British magazine Metal Forces. In 93, the band signed with the record company division of Sweden's famous Cheiron Productions and released their second album entitled Earthquake Visions the following year, before getting the chop. Cheiron Productions was led by Dennis Pop, who had first had a hit in the early 90s with Nigerian dental student turned rapper Dr Alban. He helped produce songs such as All That She Wants and The Sign for Swedish group Ace of Base, which went on to become huge international hits, with The Sign even reaching number one in America. Its parent album, Happy Nation: The Sign, became one of the biggest selling debut albums of all time with over 20 million copies sold. Ace of Base were a very big deal in the mid-90s, albeit for a brief time, and Cheiron Productions became a Swedish hit factory. Dennis Pop needed a new songwriting partner and noticed that Max had a knack for writing pop melodies, something he secretly loved to do. So Dennis kept Max on at Cheiron Studios and made him his new protege. In an interview with Time magazine from 2001, Max admits to hiding his love of pop music during his years in a heavy metal band. He cited the Bangles' Eternal Flame as an all-time favourite of his. Around this time, Dennis renamed his new apprentice Max Martin, thinking that Carl Martin Sandberg simply wasn't disco enough. His first writing credit was on Herbie Critchlow's 1995 album Fingers, and the same year he co-produced Ace of Base's second album The Bridge. Dennis had also recruited other songwriters to Cheiron, including Andreas Carlsson, Christian Lundin, Jörgen Olofsson, Per Magnusson, David Kruger, and Rami Jakob, who would all go on to have writing and production credits on huge hits with Britney, NSYNC, Backstreet Boys, Kelly Clarkson, and countless others. Some of Max's earliest production work was for 3T, a boy band from the mid-90s comprising of Michael Jackson's 3 nephews. MJ was overseeing the project and wanted to change the key on one of Max's songs. So he requested that Max and Dennis fly to LA to finish the track off with him, an offer they initially declined. They didn't see the point in changing the song as they were already happy with their work, but on second thoughts they decided it was too good of an opportunity to pass up on working with the white gloved one. And they both headed stateside to complete the song in a crappy studio outside of Los Angeles. So although Max never wrote or produced for MJ, he did work with him briefly. In '95, Pop and Martin discovered a new, all-singing, all-dancing boy band from Florida called the Backstreet Boys. Their first song with the group, We've Got It Going On, only reached number 69 in the US and also bombed in the UK in '95. It was re-released the following year in Britain and became a top 5 hit. Max had his first top 10 hit in the US with Swedish singer Robyn in early '97 and her song Do You Know What It Takes. And the same year the Backstreet Boys finally scored a hit in their homeland when Quit Playing Games reached number 2, becoming Max's first top 3 hit in America. And that was the start of a string of huge hits with the Backstreet Boys, including Backstreet's Back and As Long As You Love Me, amongst many others. Max was so instrumental in creating the group's sound and music, he has often been referred to as the 6th Backstreet Boy. In an interview with the BBC podcast They Write the Songs, Martin says that the melody for Baby One More Time came to him whilst on holiday in Florida. He was falling asleep and reluctant to get out of bed to record it on his dictaphone, and he was worried he would wake his wife up. But thankfully he did get out of bed and saved the initial melodic idea for the song along with the first lyric he thought of, Hit Me Baby One More Time. He originally envisioned it as an R&B song and pitched it to TLC, who famously said no. Swedish singer Robyn also said no. Simon Cowell heard it and asked for the song for his British boy band Five, a request Max refused, as the song had already been placed with a then unknown teenage singer from Louisiana by the name of Britney Spears. Britney recorded Baby in May '98 in Stockholm, and it became Max's first number 1 in the US the following January. But unfortunately his mentor Dennis Pop didn't live to see the momentous achievement, as he'd sadly died from stomach cancer a few months earlier, leaving Max to take over the reins of the pop machine that Cheiron Productions had become. The song would of course go on to become a global phenomenon, going to number 1 all over the world. Its parent album of the same name sold just under 30 million copies. Max even found time to work with the Backstreet Boys' arch rivals NSYNC, writing their only US number 1, It's Gonna Be Me. The teen pop phenomenon of the late 90s, early 2000s was such a money spinner that Jive Records, home to the Backstreet Boys, Britney and NSYNC, was sold in 2002 for $2.7 billion, making its founder and CEO, Clive Calder, one of the richest men in music ever. Max and Cheiron's hits were undoubtedly a key factor in the phenomenal success the company achieved. Surprisingly, at the height of their success, Cheiron decided to close down. Max felt their sound had become too ubiquitous, with pale imitations clogging up the airwaves, and radio had started to turn its back on Max's pure pop sound. R&B and hip-hop tracks from the likes of the Neptunes and Eminem were starting to dominate the charts. The early 2000s were a quiet period for Martin, who didn't score any top 10 hits in the US between '01 and '04. But he soon found new inspiration stateside when he struck up a creative partnership with a New Yorker by the name of Lucas Gottfald, otherwise known as Dr. Luke. Dr. Luke had been a lead guitarist in the Saturday Night Live house band for 6 years, and together the two would go on to have 27 US top 10 hits. Their first hit as collaborators was Since You've Been Gone. According to The Song Machine by John Seabrook, Max wanted to move in a more rock direction and initially had Pink in mind for the song. Hilary Duff was also considered, although there were doubts over her ability to pull off the demanding vocals. When head of RCA Clive Davis suggested giving the song to Kelly Clarkson, Martin was reluctant, and it took a number of conversations between the two before Max finally relented. The song became a huge international hit, reaching number 2 in the States and turning Kelly Clarkson into a superstar. And in 2008, Max scored his third number 1 stateside with Katy Perry's debut single, I Kissed a Girl. And shortly after, he scored another with Pink and So What, which was actually her first in the country. So What was also a track which featured Max's latest protege, Shellback. Shellback, whose real name is Carl Schuster, was another former Swedish rocker recruited by Max and given a dodgy moniker. His latest apprentice would go on to co-write huge hits in the 2010s, including many of Taylor Swift's biggest songs from the last decade. And in the years since, Max has continued to clock up hit after hit. Max won his first Grammy in 2015, the first of 5. Along with his 25 number 1s in the US, he's also scored 12 number 1s in the UK. He's been involved in 8 of Katy Perry's 9 US number 1s. He's won ASCAP Songwriter of the Year 11 times. He's basically ridiculously successful and wealthy, and if he didn't seem so humble and likeable, you would love to hate the guy. And now for some little known facts about some of Martin's biggest hits. We Are Never Getting Back Together started as a conversation Max was having with Taylor at the start of their first session together. Max asked Taylor about a boyfriend of hers, to which Tay-Tay responded, "We are never getting back together." Max immediately remarked that it sounded like a song title, and the rest, as they say, is history. The guitar riff for the Backstreet Boys' I Want It That Way is said to be inspired by Metallica's Nothing Else Matters. And despite their long list of hits in the States, the Backstreet Boys never had a number 1 there. Kelly Clarkson didn't like Since You've Been Gone or Behind Those Hazel Eyes the first time she heard them. She still didn't like them after she had recorded them and requested that both of them were left off the album she was making at the time, Breakaway. Since You've Been Gone, of course, went on to be one of her biggest hits. The pop classic was said to have been inspired by the Yeah Yeah Yeahs song Maps. And Simon Cowell was so eager to secure Baby One More Time for his Group 5, he offered to buy Max a top-of-the-range Mercedes, which Max had to decline as the song had already been secured by a certain Miss Britney Jean Spears. And considering Max's genius songwriting skills and the fact that he's such a good singer, many have questioned why he's never done a solo album himself and why he keeps such a low profile. In an interview with The Guardian from around the same time, he had this to say about why he maintains such a low profile. It's easy for us to say that they become these rich, spoiled divas, and I'm not talking about Britney specifically, just in general. But we forget that these artists work and tour and become super famous for our enjoyment. And then we watch their lives fall apart in front of our eyes for doing something amazing. I'm so thankful that someone actually still wants the job. And it goes back to why I don't do interviews. We're not made to be that famous. It's not normal. It's not in our DNA. And perhaps his unassuming nature can also be attributed to growing up Swedish. There is a social code understood by all Swedes called Jente law, which emphasises putting society ahead of the individual. Seeking attention for oneself, boasting about your accomplishments, and displaying your wealth is strongly discouraged. Max is simply the most successful songwriter of his generation, and probably a few others. And with no sign of him slowing down, there's a strong chance he will add to his tally of 25 US number ones in the coming years, and overtake Lennon and McCartney. And as Miss Britney Spears once said herself, the man is simply a genius. Its parent album of the same name, in an interview with the BBC podcast, Baby One More Time may sound like a simple song, but writing and producing it took a huge amount of effort. If you'd like to learn more about the process, go check out this video all about it. And if you got value from this video, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.